And thank you for inviting me. So my topic today is bioethics in the era of big data. So I think the term, like fourth industrial revolution, big data, it's circulating all over the world, right? So and I also think that biology, like medicine, it cannot be exception for the impact from big data or for IR as well. So I just try to do some research, do some surveys on what kind of bioethical issues can arise from all these big data or IR things coming. And it also somehow overlapped with my interest in internet governance as well. So I just try to put those two topics together here. And my name is Yeseul Kim. I'm originally from South Korea. I'm anyway student from yeah. So, and just ignore the title out there. So what is big biodata? It's about handling, processing, moving information that were once the domain of astronomers and high energy physicists. So computer, for example, because before it became commercialized, before personal computer came out, the computer itself was mostly used by physicists or scientists, right? But because it became quite commercialized, it became quite common, people started to leverage the power of computing to study biological researches or to study biological knowledge as well. So it's all about handling, processing, and moving information to find out something which might not have been discovered before the use of the internet or use of the computer itself. So big data itself, it's about the analysis of aggregated, very large data sets to improve medical knowledge and clinical care. So it's also about reuse and repurposing of data, which was normally used in just file, right? Which was just handwritten. But it became into machine readable format, so the computer can process it as much as possible, as fast as possible. So in North America or in European countries, this biology data mining is quite famous, and it's quite fancy research subjects these days. But it also has its own challenges, and because biological information, because it's much more heterogeneous than those in physics, and there definitely are some kind of challenges which scientists in physics could not foresee in using this computing power. So it's all about plurality and heterogeneity of information in biology. So what kind of study can be done in this big data in bioinformatics? Genetic sequences, interactions of proteins, findings in medical records, or regulation of genes, the evolution of genomes, or these kind of topics are quite maybe high science, I guess. But it can also be used for studying what microbes dwell in human body cavities and how the genetic makeup of different cancers influence how cancer or act. And also it can be used to study why coastal algae bloom, or it can also be used to host or store all those data from scientific basis of TCM, traditional Chinese medicine as well. So the area that you can cover is just too broad. It has so much possibility at this moment. So right now, scientists have to store large data sets, analyze, compare, and share them. So these handling of all these large-scale genetic analysis, large-scale biodata is so much important these days. As it has been written down there, so all these big data challenges, it generates high volumes of data. So it somehow needs to be distributed and stored. So it needs to be somehow stored and distributed computing systems. So it's all about fast analysis, storing large volume of data, and genetic studies as well. So for example, when users in the United States and Japan had difficulty accessing the data quickly, the EBI, the European Bioinformatics Institute, resolved the bottleneck by hosting mirror sites at 3 of the many remote data centers that are the many remote data centers, of the many remote data centers that are part of like Amazon Web Services, Elastic Compute Cloud Services. And it's not only about like Amazon Web Services, it's also about like some other software or computing companies hosted in the US, such as like Rackspace, VMware, Google Cloud. It all now gives some kind of like great opportunities to host all these biological data, which is so distributed, which is in very high volume these days. And aside from all this like storage or data storage problem, there is another chance, or there is another like possibility of leveraging all these computing powers in studying biology or medicine issues. So it's now like termed as infodemiology. What's infodemiology then? Like, is there anyone who've ever heard of that before? So like it's about the epidemiology of information. Yeah, so like the epidemiology, the study of epidemiology, it can now be based in all the information that people input, that people type in their like Google search history or like Yahoo search history, all of those kind of information. It's quite personal, right? But it can be now leveraged to give some insights into like making public health policy issues as well. So I think you guys heard of like this Web 1.0, Web 2.0, right? Anyone?
Yes. Yeah.
Familiar with? Yeah, sure. So like Web 1.0, it was like mostly governed, or it was like mostly proposed by some big internet companies, right? But like as time goes by, this like concept of Web 2.0 came out, and it's all about like it's now all about people giving some input into the web searches, into the companies, so that. And this is why the big data, the concept of big data could become realized these days. And because I was also in like computer science department as well in KAIST, I somehow got to understand what kind of like computer scientists are doing back there. And what they're doing right now is to make some sensors work for the people so that it can collect some data such as like humidity, temperature of all the environment that people live in, so that it can be used or processed inside computers, so that it can give some kind of feedback into scientific researches that like people do. So it's also about like wireless sensors. It's all about like congregation of all these like disparate concepts, disparate like scientific studies all together, put into this like supercomputer data process. So like as has been written here, like wireless sensors, genomics, imaging, information systems, mobile connectivity, the phones that you use, and internet, social network service like SNS, Twitter, right, Facebook, and it can now all be collected together so that it can be analyzed, so that it can give some kind of like inputs or insights which were not impossible like before the era of big data. So it's all about like computing power plus data universe. So this is another concept which have come out, InfoVisual. So it's about like an open source infovalence prototype. So surveillance, it's like the combination of the two-word information plus surveillance. But like the surveillance, like the term itself, it's quite creepy, right? So I thought that this is where the ethical concerns should arise in using all this like data. So what can be some kind of like new ethical concerns with big data or in the era of big data? Privacy and consent, right? We all make some kind of like Google search, right? And we also need to consent to all the like terms and conditions. But we usually don't go through all the terms and conditions. So we don't know like what kind of information of ourselves are hosted and like stored and processed by Google or those kind of like internet companies, right? So it's all about like privacy and consent. And it can be also the problem within like power relationship, like between the consumers and these companies, like citizens and government as well. So it's all about like data collection, data connection, and data convergence. So the problem is like when all the disparate data that you give some input into the internet companies, it can be connected without like knowing, without you knowing that they are doing some kind of research with all this data, right? So this all can somehow lead to the misuse of the personal data, such as the combination of like user medical logs, internet records, public government data for surveillance. If all these kind of things got together at one point, it can create the wholeness of yourself, right? You can like figure out who you are right now and what kind of problem you're going through right now. For example, like if you're having some kind of like depression, so you Googled it, like what kind of like medicine is good for depression, then it can now process. It can like the company itself, it now has your own information about like you're going through depression, right? Which you don't want to actually reveal to other people. And it's not only about like European countries, because there are also some like values in Asian countries as well. For example, Asia Pacific Bioinformatics Conference, it was already established in 2003. Asia Pacific Bioinformatics Network, it was established in 1998. And also government has a lot of like information about like biodata of all the citizens living in Asian countries. So out of all these concerns, EU actually recently enacted GDPR, which denotes General Data Protection Regulation. So it's the European countries, they now started to protect all the data of their citizens so that internet companies based in all over the world cannot misuse the data of their own citizens. So I was just like wondering whether Asian countries have some kind of like equivalent laws for GDPR. I'm not so sure. Yeah. Then, what does like GDPR provide in considering ethical concerns about like big data? So it's about like one single set of personal data protection rules for the definitely like EU citizens, not Asian citizens, and it's also about right to personal data protection. So it's also about like specific rights for individuals, like the data subject. So it's right to be informed, right of access, right to rectification, right to erasure, right to restrict processing, right to data portability, right to object. But at the same time, I also got to think of like this somehow like quite age-old problem. I thought that like there's quite like fine line between the good and the evil. Like for example, many of the scientific breakthroughs have been achieved with the violation of like ethical codes of that era. We cannot ignore this, right? So then like how can we find some kind of like middle point in between this? So I thought that just in this big data era, maybe right-oriented approach can be adopted so that like people can have some kind of like ethical concerns whenever they use like all the data gathered through the computers, through the internet. For example, right of the donors, right of the data providers, right of the animals, right of the patients. So because all these like scientific discoveries should work for the people, we should protect the right of the people, right? So maybe all this kind of like right-oriented approach might somehow give some insight into protecting all the rights of the data givers at this like at this big data era. So it's also about like how to guard all this data. So it can be some maybe solutions can come out with the combination of legal and technical solutions altogether. So like for example, when laws are enacted, companies used to comply with all those laws. So they have to sometimes like upgrade their software systems so that you can protect, so that you can encrypt all the data in their storage, right? So with these laws, companies tend to protect the data with advanced technologies. So it's not just about like legal solution, it's also about technical solutions as well. And thank you for listening. This is all.
Can you go back to the infodemiology slide, please?
Okay.
Has anybody else heard of this, infodemiology? I've only heard from you before.
I've heard of it.
And so, but here you've mentioned the public health professionals. It's related, of course, to any other sphere, in educational or social welfare as well, yeah? But you've mentioned for the purpose of this slide, it's public health linkage. Is that right? For the conference here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hassan, please.
I have a question. Oh, can I just?
Use the mic, it's better.
Yeah, my question concerned the terminology bio big data. I mean, if you look at the World Health Organization, I think even yesterday, Derry was looking at bioethics in a holistic way, that health is not just a biological issue, it's about physical, mental, psychological. Now, can we use this big data to preserve also information which is not biological? I'm asking that because you also mentioned that you can also use, if for instance they have depression, you mentioned the issue of depression, I can also go into there. So is there any way in which, besides biological data, you can also preserve other information concerning public health in your big data and not call it bioinformation?
I think you just pointed out some really important like problem, not problem, important point. So, like neuroscience, it now somehow like makes people understand that like psychological problem, it's not always about just a psychological problem, right? It's also about like biological problem, and that's how like modern like medicine is used to cure all these depressions. Although like there can be some kind of like definitely like other social aspects as well, which impact like the health of like psychological health of the patient, right? So yeah, I think definitely it's not just about like body data, it's also about like some other data as well. Any other questions?
I have one. First, thank you for such brilliant information. I just want to ask you that how can you assure common people about their data protection?
Pardon?
How can you assure common people about their data protection when we see that the people in the power of very high post in government also, in private also, when their data is not secure? I give you the example when the Hillary Clinton, when fight for the president election, her email are leaked.
Right. Yes.
She is at the top, and US, we say US has the best technology. When her data is not protected, then how can we assure common people about their data protection?
So like as far as I understand, the problem with Hillary Clinton, it wasn't about like the data leakage itself, but it was about like her using different email account which was given to her from the government. So that was the problem. It wasn't. Are you sure?
Okay.
Yeah.
Although she used different account,
Yeah.
then also she has some right of privacy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like
But-
the government. Yeah, those kind of like accounts, email accounts, which were given by some specific like government agency. They use different like technology to keep all the email going and coming and going through the data server with with different like, type of like,
That I understand. But I'm asking that how can you assure common people about their privacy? Like
So-
in India, I told you.
Yeah.
In India, we have one system called Aadhaar card,
Right.
in which common people have to give all his fingerprints,
Yeah.
iris,
Right.
and all his identity is with government. Now, if this data, and there is news that data is leaked, some data is also leaked. So how can we assure the common people that you give the data to the government, but it is secure? We have a technology, but when we see the news that some data is leaked, I tell you in India, more than lakhs of ATMs of SBI, one of the biggest bank of India, his data is leaked. So how can, I am just asking, how can we assure people that in this era of big data,
So it's
your
quite.
data is...
I think it's very complicated, but like, and there can be so many solutions for that. But like what's happening right now these days, especially like internet governance bill, because there are so many like internet governance forums happening, not only in Asian countries but also in like North America and European continents as well. They're talking about all these issues. How can like the government, how can people can protect their own data with this increasing numbers of like hacking attempts, right? So like I know that like several banks even they have been hacked, so that some amount of like their deposits have been like leaked to other countries. So maybe so that's why some like international cooperation is really necessary these days, so that like Interpol, like organizations such as like Interpol, can like act against those kind of like crimes, right? Because it's definitely a crime. It's a theft, right? Theft of data, theft of like privacy, right? And from like in that case, I mean, for Indian case, maybe like civil movement can also be some kind of like solutions, so that like the government officials can be aware of like the importance of protecting all the data stored in their like governmental storage, right? So that can also so like awareness of the citizens, the common citizens. That's really important, I guess. Yeah.
Other comments or questions? So I put there next to you the International Declaration on Genetic Data. This was a document agreed by UNESCO, by all the member countries, in 2003. And it was considering about the big biodata. And so it was the guidelines that every country in the world agreed to try to regulate the use of human genetic data. Also in the Human Genome Organization Ethics Committee, we had worked on a document on privacy protection. And at the time we had a session with the Europeans who were working both in Brussels and Strasbourg on the information guidelines. So that was an overlap in terms of the genomic data and the computer data, information data. So, in fact, any data is important. So that's the implication. So, is there anything different for big biodata as opposed to big car data or computer data, or what's particular about biodata?
So like, as I've already written before, biological information is just too heterogeneous. And like, because you all have like your background in like medicine and biology, right? It's not just about like cell studies, it's also about like all the like epidemiology inside like the human bodies, and it's all connected and it's all too different. And as far as I know, like even like genetic like studies, it can be sometimes like separated into like people from Asian countries, people from European countries, right? So I think that's the issue with like big data for biology. It's not something that can be like uniformly processed, but there can be like several other methods to study all these kind of like biological big data.
Okay. So in bioethics, what's our extent of biodata? So for example, later this morning we'll have a paper looking at whiteness, racial data. Now is that biodata, even though the information is handled through paper, which describes your race or ethnicity or religious group, for example?
Yeah, it's definitely a set of data, but like to process all this data, it needs to be machine readable, so that it can be like typed into the computer, so that like machine can process. But like still, it's not perfect. Like the human efforts behind all this like big data analysis is just so huge. So. Yeah.
But let's extrapolate from an AI system that is no longer reliable on machines, but using organic bioprocessing like our mind. So we're making a giant human mind to process data. It no longer needs to be machine readable, only readable by the matrix in which case we are using. Because so is there a difference between data that I process in my mind and data in a computer? And do we therefore regulate, for example, what people can see? Like I can't go to the ladies' washroom because I'm not a lady. So that's data which I'm restricted from seeing. I can't go to the military base because I'm not meant to see it. I have been to the nuclear power station on Kalipuram, which Dr. Salvanaga mentioned, with permission. So that data I can access. So we do actually restrict the types of data for people's processing.
Sure. Right.
And maybe that's going to be, so even data, let's say we're talking about finding new worlds, aliens in space, using different data. Is it data which the government will restrict us from seeing? And
Definitely there should be some types of data which like citizens, like common citizens are restricted to get.
you think it should be, or it should be all open?
Depends.
So what's the criteria for restriction? It comes back to ethical principles. Will it cause harm? But does it cause harm? So let's say I'm living in communist China, and recently there's concerns about the reductions in transparency in the political process, some of the movements. So that's political data I'm no longer entitled to see.
I think that's the will of the government. I mean, government itself, it's not something unorganic, right? It's also about like the group of people, right? So like, what if like the common citizens just decided that like the government body have some kind of like information which they're not supposed to have, right? So yeah, that's.
So so do we have the same ethical principles underlying it? So what we talked about yesterday, self-determination. So if I have self-determination, I can determine what data I want to share to you. So I hide my income because I don't want to pay taxes. But the government says, no, you have to open your income.
I mean,
Yeah.
everything is not perfect, and I know that like there is so many tax evasion happening all over the world. So it's also about the fight between some group of peoples and government sometimes. So like, I don't think that like government is like unilaterally like evil or unilaterally like good. Sometimes like government itself, it can also like play some kind of like neutral role, but it can also play some kind of like evil role or some kind of like good role as well. So I think it's all connected. I mean, yeah.
Right.
Because I know that there are some people, definitely, there are some good governments who want to work for the people, but there are some people who want to hide their all incomes so that they can somehow like just seize all like the money just in their pockets instead of just distributing their income to some underprivileged people. Yeah. So I think it's very complicated issue, and I don't feel like I can give like some kind of one answer to your question, to be honest. Yeah.
Thank you. Hassan?
Yeah. I think my problem is not what I was saying there, whether I want to hide information or not. I'm just trying to build on what the colleague from India said. I mean, if you look at our governments, both national and international, I mean, the information communication technology has gone to the extent that the governments know everything about its citizens, I mean, anywhere you are. So the most important thing is, you don't have to answer what I'm saying, is how do we ensure that that information which is already available is protected, and the governments that don't have to ask more information from people which they already know. For instance, if I pass from one border to another, I have always to fill forms which governments already know. Even within the same country I live in, if you live in South Africa, live here in Nepal, the government knows already about how I come because I filled already a visa somewhere. the most important thing ethically is, as he asked, how do you ensure that the information which is already there is protected and is not misused?
So I think I've already gave the answer to the question, like, because I've already answered, like, gave the answer to, yeah, like enacting some kind of like legislation such as like GDPR. Like the European, it was proposed by like European governments. It wasn't actually proposed by any like citizens. Definitely somehow like government somehow responded to the requests of the EU citizens. So like what I want to like say, what I really want to say here is that like government itself is not always like plain evil. I mean, sometimes definitely have. I sometimes feel like government have. It all depends. I mean, it all depends. Like I know that like there is some kind of like very dictator like regime in some part of the world, and I understand that, but like there are definitely some governments who want to protect their citizens. So they need some kind of and I really think it's really complicated. It's really at the like high level, like philosophical level of issue. What you're asking here, and I mean like the conference that I was attending, we were also about to give some kind of answers, but like even the lawyers like they were somehow like they were also like trying to find some kind of answers to your question. Like for example, like you know that like all terrorist attacks are happening in European countries. So that's why European governments really want to get some data from like all the messenger applications, right? And it's really important to protect the European citizens so that they cannot be victims to those kind of like terrorist attacks, right? So I think that's why I always think that like there is some kind of like fine line between plain good and plain evil. It's not like strictly, the answer is always not strictly given. So I think it's all about like making some kind of efforts to find the right answer, but like still right answer is really difficult to find. Yeah, like it all depends on like in which party you're working for, right? So yeah, I hope this is the answer. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to show you. So from her talk on data, this is from the paper I did on the behavior project, and just to show the relation of to our bioethics discussion. The situation here is the data that we're getting in, we're feeding in. We have a dilemma. In bioethics, we have to make choices and a response to a dilemma. So the data, if you can analyze the data, the situation here, it feeds into our mental process. Now, I have a question for you in terms of the ideas. So the ideas are another type of data. So I have two types. I have a situation analysis, which is data, and I have the different ideas also feeding in here. So these are also, I think, in the expansion of your really big data. It becomes the data of the situation data plus all the ideas that we have. Then we have the ideas include our experiences. So, for example, a computer learning to play Go or chess. Its data includes its outcomes, its ideas that this move worked and this move didn't work. Or that I was not nice to this person yesterday, and if I think about why I wasn't nice to that person, that's the data of my experience of how I can become a better response. So yeah, the question there for the linkage is very good, and I think you did a good job to link the data questions to public health. The bioethics was also looking at all choices and all responses that we make as an information processor. So the more that we process data using ideas and experience, which is another type of data, yeah? And I don't know if people are looking at that so much, but I think in the future, the more and more we have, what we call data becomes all knowledge and all wisdom. So we're going to talk about data, the wisdom of indigenous traditional sources, which is also data. And the data of what we learned yesterday, it helps us today. Yes. So any closing reflections before you have to reply?
So like concerning that like ideas, a number of like disparate ideas coming together so that we can make better choices. I think so the presentation that I gave when you visited like HICE last year, right? I think I was talking about some kind of like these ideas, right? Because I really wanted to use indigenous like medical resources from all over the world so that it can somehow like be stored in the big data so that it can be used for time appropriate like healings or cures for all the people like suffering in the world. So like I know that like Ayurveda from like Indian culture, it has been some kind of like medical wisdom for like more than like 1,000 years, right? Or like maybe like 3,000, 5,000 years, right? It's also about like TCM, like traditional Chinese medicine. They have also been some kind of really important like medical judgments to cure all the people. But like so it's not only about like Western like approach to medical science is the best, right? So I somehow feel like, and I've also done some kind of research, and there are researchers who are working to somehow like scientifically prove or to make some kind of like evidence-based approach to TCM or Ayurveda as well. So I think something that you mentioned here is already happening, and I think as like more and more people are coming together like this from all over the world, maybe we can contribute to making some kind of like more broad knowledge and more diverse knowledge to the world so that people all over the world can be benefited.
Thank you. Thank you very much.